Does anybody actually want to be a solo consultant?
It seems like it would be an easy question to answer, but I think it is such a loaded question that we may have a long conversation about it today.
I got time.
Okay, perfect. Me too.
You get what I'm saying? Like I find I'm often surprised at how many people at least say they don't have aspirations for growth. They don't want to build a team, build a larger firm. It's almost like they want to build a bit of a lifestyle consulting business. That it's not to say that you can't have a decent lifestyle if you grow a larger business, but often that's a belief issue as well. People think that if I stay small, stay solo, I'll have more control over my life and my lifestyle, my balance, less responsibilities. And it's like they just set their sights there. And I find that in our experience working with clients, they often don't think about building something larger until they've reached a point where maybe the limitations of being a solo become very apparent. And as I say that out loud, like that was true for me. It's got me questioning, do they really just want to be solos? Or do they just not know enough yet to be able to have a larger goal?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, this comes down to a lack of kind of nuanced thinking about the whole situation. Excuse me. People want to grab on to the things that they believe are true of being a solo consultant, right? Or untrue, or things that they don't want. So they'll focus on, okay, to your point, I don't want to work any harder. That's one. I don't want to be responsible for people. So I don't want to bring anyone else on board because that makes me really uncomfortable and nervous. I don't want to have to answer to anyone in any capacity. And so the assumption is that if those are my goals, then therefore I must be alone in this. When the reality is, if you truly think through kind of what's true about each of those things and what's not true about each of those things, then there are solutions that allow you to grow your business and still maintain, the way of working that you want to have. And I think we just don't put enough thought into it.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is we're often fleeing from those very things when we go solo, right? 100%. We're fleeing from the dysfunctional team that we used to be a part of. We're fleeing from the nightmare of a boss that we never want to be. Yeah, I was, candidly, part of my mindset is I just had some bad experiences with leadership that soured me on being a leader, at least in the early days. And we're often running away from, most folks that become solos were responsible for other people in corporate. Like they had teams, they had reports, and we're often fleeing from that entire structure and everything that comes with it. Like, so it's the opposite of working at a big consulting firm or a big company or in corporate is solo, where it's just you. There's no boss, there's no peers, there's no water cooler, there's no direct reports, there's no big team. You're solely responsible for yourself. And I get it because I thought this way at one point. There's a certain freedom that we associate with that.
Yeah, and I think this comes down to maybe, the issue that many of us have all the time, right? The question of if you're running away from something, you're running towards something. And if your focus is on the things that you're trying not to have, or you're trying not to be, or you're trying to avoid, then it's really hard to see the things that you want to move towards. And when you ask someone why they became a consultant, to your point, very often they give a laundry list of the things they don't want, right? I want to be a consultant because I don't want this, because I don't want this, because I don't want this. Less often, and certainly this is much less often early on in people building their consulting business, do they have a list of things that they want to move towards? And even if they have a list of things they want to move towards, really what they're doing is just framing those things they're trying to get away from in a different way. And so, going through the thought exercise of really understanding what it is that you want, right? How you want to work, what that looks like, and not just in terms of revenue, because that's sort of the first thing that we all think about, but what does it mean in terms of how you want to work with people around you? What kinds of conversations you want to have on a day-to-day basis? What do you want to be thinking about? What do you not want to be thinking about when it comes to your business? When you can work your way into getting really clear on what the picture looks like, as opposed to what the picture doesn't look like, then that can make all the difference in figuring out how to solve it.
Because often there were things about those prior experiences that you liked and that you're going to miss, right? So one of the things that we hear, because, out of our clients, I would say, I'm making up a number here, but 60 to 70% are probably solos. Mm-hmm. And the other 20, 30% are small partnerships. And the thing that we hear from solos quite a bit is, boy, it's lonely out there. And maybe not a month 1 or month 2 or month 3, but year 2 or 3. And you run the show and it's your business and you're a company of one, and sure, you have clients, but they're not your peers. They're your clients. And that's one of the things that people really appreciate about working with us is, okay, now I have not only, coaches, advisors via the program, but I also have peers. I have this mastermind and community of peers that are working alongside me on very similar things. And without that, it's a pretty lonely experience. Mm-hmm. And I know I suffered from this when the thing that I appreciated most about working in consulting firms was honestly the privilege of working with very smart people every single day, which I don't even know that I was aware of that privilege when I had it. But when I lost it, yeah, sure, my clients were smart, but that's, again, different. We weren't, it's a different dynamic, right, than engaging with your peers in a problem-solving capacity. And I certainly missed it. And all of a sudden felt like I was on an island and was craving that kind of intellectual camaraderie, if you will, with my peers that I didn't have anymore.
Yeah, and to your point, we often see just like being around people as enough. And often then we go to the wrong places to find that kind of camaraderie. Trying to use your spouse or your partner as your sounding board, right? There are occasional scenarios where that is a good idea, and often just goes terribly wrong, right? Mm-hmm. They're off having their own life, doing their own thing. They aren't wound up in your business the way they are. They're not maybe starved for human interaction around the business the way you are. And they also have a different stake in the game, right? They want and need you to be successful for different reasons than someone who is, strictly a peer or a mentor or, someone who is not part of your family and not, writing checks out of the same checkbook would be. And so I think it's really important to figure out, if we're talking about the people around you, what it is that you need from that and what it is you can contribute to those conversations, and then make sure you're going to the right place. To your point, that's why people coming out of 90-day pipeline, they're so excited by not just everything that they've learned and everything they're taking out into the world in terms of, strategies. They're excited because they've also built relationships, right? They've decided because now they have someone to talk to, because they have an accountability partner, because now they, have a list of people they can reach out to who are maybe a year further down the road that they are. And they can ask them, okay, when you ran into this problem, how did you solve it, right? What happened? What did you do? And just have those, to your point, intellectually stimulating conversations that you can't have with yourself.
I feel like this is really coming to a head now, right? With first it was COVID and everybody got excited to work from home at first, and then all of a sudden co-work memberships went through the roof because we needed some level of social interaction outside of our immediate family. And now with AI, I think a lot of folks are just craving that human interaction, because what they otherwise used to go to humans for, even in limited ways, they're now going to Claude and ChatGPT for, which obviously has certain merits and advantages from a convenience perspective, but is absolutely no substitute for real, thoughtful human interaction and dialogue. And, by no means is today's episode about convincing you that you shouldn't be a solo. That's entirely your prerogative. That's your choice. That's your decision to weigh. But I think what I'd like to do at least is call your attention to some of the limitations in doing so, and maybe dismantle some of the beliefs that you have about growing beyond that. Not because you should, but because I want you to know it's an option. And I kind of wish people had told me some of these things when I was, frankly, and Carrie knows this, very much heads down. I'm going to be a solo. I'm never going to build a team. I'm never going to grow. I'm going to be like that like brilliant social recluse. Right? I'm going to be like really, really good at what I do, but completely on an island. And that's frankly what I built. And there were some real limitations in that.
Well, that might be a good way to talk through this, right? Because I think your experience isn't necessarily all that different from anybody else's. And when we had those conversations at the time, I think, what became apparent pretty quickly was that you had this feeling, or, you're making these statements that you wanted to be solo, you were going to manage it all yourself, you wanted to handle it. And on the other hand, there were entire aspects of the business that you really had very little interest in dealing with, right? Yeah. And so you were putting yourself in this place of discontent, discomfort, pain right off the bat, because you were saying, okay, I'm going to do it on myself for these particular reasons. And therefore that means I'm going to slog through this stuff that I really don't enjoy. And I guess that's just what my life's going to be for the foreseeable future, right? And so I think what's interesting, and for people that are listening, is just understanding, okay, where's the tension in that? If you say, I'm going to be a solopreneur forever, and that means I'm going to grow to this place and that's going to be it, and this is how my business is going to function, what is the tension that exists? What is the thing that you think, ooh, that sounds good, except, right? Like, what is it that's, kind of nags at you when you make that grand statement?
So for me, there were three things. And to be super clear, I was very much, what's the word I'm looking for? Convicted in my position.
Yes.
That I was going to stay solo and I was not going to build a team. Probably more than you are right now, right? The solo consultant that's listening. And ultimately it took years for me to kind of dismantle that conviction. And there were three things that I saw that I couldn't ignore. And that the tension that you speak of, 3 points of tension, let's say, that created more pain than I was willing to bear as a solo. Number one was I capped out on revenue. Mm-hmm. And I'm using revenue as a placeholder for both money and impact, right? As a measure for both money and impact. I couldn't make more money and I wanted to make more money. I'm not going to apologize for that. Okay. And I just felt so limited in how many clients I could serve. I had maybe, when things were going well, maybe 4 or 5 clients at a time. And my business model at the time wouldn't allow more than that. So when I was busy and just knew that there were so many other clients out there that I could help and that I could serve, and that there's a very large market of prospective clients out there that I could access. And there was just that was a very unsettling feeling. Like, they're out there. I can help. I could grow. I have so much more to offer, but I'm limited. I'm limited by this, frankly, artificial constraint I placed upon myself. Yeah. And eventually that just, the math on that didn't add up for me anymore. And then the second and third are very much related, and you spoke to them briefly. The second would be, I was doing things I didn't want to do. So as a solo, y'all know this, you do everything. Yeah, you might outsource bookkeeping and, like kind of the obvious things that you don't want to do, don't know how to do, hopefully. But otherwise you're wearing all the hats in the business, sales, marketing, delivery. Within delivery, there's, depending on how streamlined your operation is, probably not very much. You're doing a million different things for different clients, and the context switching becomes very expensive, whether you realize it or not. The context switching between the different roles and hats that you have to wear in the business creates a ton of inefficiency. And there are things that I just didn't want to be doing. And that was the second problem. And as a result, the third problem was I wasn't very good at those things. Mm-hmm. So I knew that those particular functions were being executed at a level that was maybe just barely good enough to get by, but nowhere near a level of excellence and nowhere near kind of the standard I was hoping to set. And so I think it was a combination of those three things: feeling like I couldn't grow because I was out of time, feeling like there were still things I was doing that I didn't want to be doing forever, and feeling like I just wasn't meeting a certain standard of quality because there were certain activities I wasn't particularly engaged in.
And you talked about the fact that it took you quite some time to move through that, to get past that. For the sake of the folks who are listening who maybe don't want it to take that long or, want to figure it out, want to understand it, how did you get there?
Well, I think everything changes after you make your first or second, I was going to say hire, but it might be the wrong word. I'd say resource, because I'm not necessarily advocating for you to go out and hire full-time staff on day one. And that's certainly not what I did. I brought on, kind of fractional support. I think you were early on, Carrie, in terms of fractional support. And there were others. And I seem to recall that, like, when I first made that move, it was enlightening in terms of A, how much time it freed up, B, how much energy it saved me, C, how much I enjoyed the interaction with other people working on the business with me, and then D, kind of seeing the fruits and the impact of that kind of collaboration. And it kind of reminded me of the things I liked from my old corporate days, right? Where, smart people putting their heads together and collaborating on difficult problems can yield some really compelling results. And once I started to see that, it definitely kind of changed my mindset on what was possible, because at the end of the day, I knew that there was a bigger game to play than me staying solo. I knew that there was a larger market to serve. I knew there was a bigger opportunity. And through those experiences, bringing people on and collaborating, it became clear that that was the path to playing the bigger game than I could ever play on my own.
Yeah. So, what it comes down to is, as most things, to self-awareness, right? A little self-reflection and understanding, what it is that you're really looking for, and not getting so caught up in your story. Because, I think what I'm hearing you say is, if you had not sort of repeated over and over and over again, in such a convicted way, I'm going to stay solo, I'm never going to have a team, it's just how it's going to be. If you'd not sort of bought into that story and held onto it so very tightly, this could have happened faster. This could have happened sooner, potentially, right? You could have moved forward, in this different way more quickly than you did. And everyone has their own path and takes their own timeline. But, if I want to say anything to the folks that are listening, it's exactly that. If you are saying to yourself, okay, this is the limitation that I'm putting on myself, because that's exactly what it is, right? A limitation I'm putting on myself and on my business. What I want you to be is very clear on what the whys are behind it. And, second to that, how those problems can be solved in a creative way, right? In a way that makes sense, that doesn't necessarily have you hanging on to that story.
And so I think the honest to goodness truth here is, if you ask people, and I've asked a lot of people this question, who have said, well, yeah, I'm solo consultant, I want to be at 2, 3, 4, 500K. Usually the answer is somewhere in that range, 2 to 500K as a solo. And when I ask them if they have any aspirations to grow beyond a solo, larger revenue, and build the team, etc. The answer always comes down to, well, I don't want to take on the risk, or I don't want to build a team, or I don't want the financial pressure, I don't want this, that, or the other. Right? Or they just hedge to a smaller goal because they're not sure if it's possible. My contention here is that pretty much all of you, without exception, I'd say 9 out of 10 of you, if you could have the larger business with larger revenue, mitigate the downstream risk, have a team of people that you enjoy working with, be able to impact more clients, serve more clients at a higher level, you would take it. What's standing in your way is a bunch of solvable problems that you maybe haven't committed to solving yet, but are absolutely solvable problems.